getting started. When I was 4, I always felt safe because I had no idea what danger was. I had an older friend, I think she was about 5. She was very instrumental in getting us to the candy store that was 3 blocks from my house. On this particular day, when we got to the store, it was closed. We didn't have a backup plan, and so we engaged in magical thinking, as 4- and 5-year-olds do. And as it turns out, it worked. A man approached us. He could have been 20 or 40. I had no idea. I was only 4. He was just bigger and taller. He asked us what was the matter. So we explained to him that our candy store was closed and we didn't have any way of getting candy. He said, no problem. I'll take you to another candy store. It's about a mile away. And he said he'd walk us to that candy store and then bring us back to this candy store, which then we'll find our own way home. So, as it turns out, that's exactly what happened. I get home a few hours later and I'm so excited. I tell my mom, Mom, you'll never believe this. This really nice man took us to this candy store downtown and got our candy, and then he walked us back to the first candy store, and it was great. Well, she was livid. I didn't know why. I mean, she didn't say, I'll take you to the candy store. But I got the message anyway. This might be an example of really bad parenting from the 60s, but it wasn't atypical in a small western Washington state town where I grew up. In fact, that hands-off parenting style made us kids more daring and resilient and adventurous. And I have kids now, and even though I wanted to parent them the way I grew up, it turns out that you can't do that anymore. The schools, the after-school programs, the camps, even the state mandate that we know where our kids are at all times, and when they're coming home, and what they're doing, and how they're getting there. Even the parents in my kids' carpool followed these rules and made sure I followed them too. Well, by the time my children were about 9 and 10 respectively, I figured it out. I got on board with the 21st Century Parenting Handbook, and we were taking our kids on their very first voyage to Israel. It was their first foreign trip, and everyone was super excited. Everyone was on their best behavior. But after a week of being crammed into one hotel room and stuffed into the same car day after day, it got a little old and my kids fell back into their default mode, which sounded something like this. Mom, he took up more of the car seat than I did. Oh yeah? Well, her piece was bigger than mine. And on it went, until it devolved into, shut up. No, you shut up. These two were worse than the Israelis and the Palestinians at the negotiating table. They were measuring life's unfairness in inches. When we saw an Israeli soldier hitchhiking on the side of the road, he had an Uzi machine gun strapped to his shoulder, didn't hesitate. Picked him up right away, put him in between the two kids. And he said, all right, kids, you're going to get along, or this soldier is going to make you get along. Well, we were hoping that he would be a permanent peacekeeper in the back seat, but unfortunately, he only wanted to stay for a few kilometers, and then we had to let him go. Oh, well. Towards the end of our shut up, no, you shut up, 2-week vacation, we ended up in a city called Haifa, which is in northern Israel. Haifa is built on a hill, and at the very very top of this hill is an ancient archaeological site. What's interesting about this site is stones were moved there so that everything is very close together. So you get the whole image of like a whole village in a very small area. I like to think of it as an archaeological petting zoo. So at this archaeological site, there were houses and arches and olive pits. What I mean by an olive pit is a 10 to 15-foot hole in the ground that's lined with stones. And I imagine that either olives were stored there or that's where they pressed the olives to collect the olive oil. Anyway, my family's walking around this beautiful archaeological petting zoo, and for some reason, we're the only people there. After a few minutes of walking around, my kids fall back into their default mode. You're fat. You're stupid. You're ugly. Oh yeah, I hate you. So my daughter comes up to me and says, "Mom, he's picking on me." Well, after 2 weeks of this 21st century parenting, I had enough. I had enough of negotiating and being fair and making everything equal. It wasn't working anyway. I dove deep into my roots and I channeled my mother. And I said, "There are plenty of rocks around here. Why don't you just pick one up and throw it at your brother's head?" I didn't mean it. I thought that would shock her into figuring out how to get along. But when you're in the Holy Land, biblical references become abundantly usable. So it wasn't surprising when my daughter picked up a rock. She was beginning to look like David, and there was a reenactment of David and Goliath. Not Goliath.
Yes,
Goliath, sorry. Okay, but there was only one problem. As she pulled her arm back to throw the rock at my son, I was standing in between the two of them. As a rock whizzed past my head, I took a step back to avoid the rock. And as I stepped back, I fell into an olive pit. Let me remind you, an olive pit is a 10 to 15-foot hole in the ground lined with stones. As I fall back, I'm banging my elbows on the rocks and I land, bam, on my butt. Damn, did that hurt. I'm lying at the bottom, I'm checking to see if I broke any of my limbs, and I'm thinking, any minute now, I'm gonna see my family's heads at the top of the hole. But it's silent. There's nobody there. I'm feeling a little bit like Joseph after his brothers threw him into a pit to die. But he didn't die because he was sold into slavery. I wasn't going to let that fate happen to me. Slowly and painfully, I crawl out of the pit. I get to the surface of the earth. I look around. Where are the people? Where's the rescue crew? What happened to my family? This doesn't make any sense. Slowly, I limp back to the car. And as I get to the car, I see my whole family sitting there, quietly. I'm confused. What happened? I open the door and I ask my husband, "What's going on? Why are you all sitting so quietly in the car?" He says, "Well, our daughter threw the rock at our son, but it missed. A chase ensued, and he ran after them to make sure they didn't kill each other. As it turns out, parenting from the 60s really does work, but it comes at a price, and it certainly isn't safe.
It's okay. You can stop.